Welcome to Around the Empire. This is a fully independent podcast. Lend your support, patreon.com/aroundtheempire, rockfin.com/aroundtheempire, paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. There will be some more ways to support the show, too, in the coming weeks. Also, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm your host, Joanne Leon, and this is a panel podcast. Joining me are Kyle Anzalone from Conflicts of Interest, Kelley Lane, and Dan Wright. This is a panel discussion about the war in Afghanistan and the evacuation of tens of thousands of Afghans, most of whom will be settling in the United States. There's also a bonus episode, After Hours segment, where we let loose on the foreign policy establishment blob of idiots, the profiteering, the pivot to China, and more. We recorded this on August 27th, 2021. Welcome to Around the Empire. We have something different for you today. We have a roundtable panel podcast here, and the people with me today, I think you already know, Dan Wright, the co-founder of the podcast, Kelley Lane, who co-hosts the podcast. I know you know her from there. And Kyle Anzalone, who's been on, we've done podcasts together many times. So I think these are all familiar faces to you. And we're trying something out new, which we hope we're going to turn into, or I hope that I'm going to turn it into an Around the Empire live type show. Doing some experimentation and playing around with some things. And who knows, one of these times we may pop up on a live stream. Anyway, thanks for coming on tonight. It's great to see you guys. Great to talk with you. And tonight our topic's going to be, of course, Afghanistan. We'll talk about some other things too. And we're going to start this out as a regular main public show, like all the others. But instead of a bonus question for patrons, we're going to have an after show where we're going to speak even more freely than we do in the main interview. So it should be interesting. All right, guys. So let's talk Afghanistan. I got some numbers. Just I thought I might throw these in the beginning because I sat through the whole Pentagon briefing today. So now you have to sit through some numbers, but no, they're pretty interesting numbers. And by the way, just a little aside. Remember yesterday when I was telling you guys that there was a helicopter or two helicopters or some kind of aerial machine that flew over our house and shook the whole house and scared the living heck out of us? And I didn't know what it was. Well, I think I know what it was now. I think they were military, maybe even Chinooks. It was something really big, because we have helicopters that fly over here all the time going to the hospital. And that's because the Philadelphia...
Today, right?
It was yesterday that it happened. Did it happen to you too?
Oh, yeah. Some buzzed us that was crazy low.
Yeah.
I was like, man, they're flying low.
Yeah.
And it shook everything. And I went...
Shook the house, outside. Shook the windows. We're like, yeah. What?
Well, we have military bases right around our way. They'd be going to Fort Dix. There's a National Guard base.
I'll tell you why I think that's what it was, Dan, because Dan and I live just a couple towns away from each other. The Philadelphia airport and the Dulles airport are going to be used as airports that help keep the flow of refugees from, they're called evacuees from Afghanistan, to keep the flow going. And so Philadelphia was set up for today. But they also announced some new bases where they are housing these special immigrant visas and the at-risk Afghans. So it's not just people who are applying for the visas. There's a new category called at-risk Afghans. So anyway, the bases that are being used, well, I'll just read you what I have. So the DOD is temporarily housing up to 50,000 Afghans, both special visa and Afghans at risk. And then he also mentioned some people who already have green cards. So when they get here, I guess I think they can just move on once they get to an airport. So the bases that are being used, and there will probably still be some more, are Fort Lee in Virginia, Fort Bliss in Texas, Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, and Joint Base McGuire Dix Lakehurst.
Lakehurst, yeah.
So this is about, I don't know, 30, 35 miles north of us, Philadelphia Airport. I'm on the flight route for Philadelphia Airport. You probably are too, Dan.
Yep.
And so we're about, I don't know, 15 miles from, I'm about 15 miles from Philadelphia. So
that's where the Kosovo refugees went. The Kosovo refugees went to Fort Dix when that war broke out. That's where they actually housed them. So that was an open base at a time. So I actually was there doing some stuff. And there's all these signs and like this weird language. I'm like, what is this? What are these signs for? It's like, all the Kosovo refugees are here.
Yeah. So, it's called a joint base. It's just some of the things that we've been doing. Instead of closing bases, they're combining them into things called joint base. So it's not just an Army base or a Marine base or an Air Force base. Now they sort of kind of put them together and they get a new name.
Dix and McGuire are contiguous. So they're literally right on top of each other.
Were.
And Lakehurst is pretty far away. It's near Tom's River.
Isn't that the Hindenburg?
Where the Hindenburg went down. Yep, exactly. And so it's
not too far, but it's not
contiguous. No, it's not connected. You'd have to drive 20, 30 minutes to get from Fort Dix to
So Fort
Lakehurst.
Dix was what? The Army base, and
Fort Dix is Army and McGuire is Air Force.
Air Force, right. Lakehurst, I guess, is some kind of air.
Navy. It's Navy.
Okay. Yeah, so these are the bases so far that are going to they are housing the Afghans until, as they work on they're going to help them fill out their visa. They're going to give them medical care, and they're going to screen them medically, and they're just going to get them, to the point where they are settled and they have a plan. Now, other organizations, aid organizations, both government and volunteer, there are a lot of people who already do the job of resettling. I think it's called resettling.
And did you see Airbnb is offering to house 20,000 families or something like that? Yeah. Although I'm a little confused as to how much of a charity this is actually from Airbnb, because it seems like they're looking for the actual homeowners to donate the housing. Now maybe they'll chip in something, but it doesn't seem like this is Airbnb housing 20,000. It seems like
they don't have any
20,000 Americans. Right. Right, but I don't think they're comping it 100% or anything like that, at least from the announcement that I saw and what Airbnb said they were looking for. It wasn't clear, at least to me, that you would not be at least donating a little bit of your property's time to this.
It was opportunistic marketing. They're not really doing anything. They're kind of putting it out there. But and who's going to pay them? The government, maybe. Or it's funny, homelessness is a huge problem in San Francisco where they're headquartered. What happened? You never thought of this before about giving people free housing?
It's going to certainly bring up that subject. Yeah, I mean.
And here you've got a situation where you've got all this animosity among the right, for foreigners, and you're going to bring, and we've got the rent moratoriums just ended, and we're going to have so many homeless. It's just, I think it could be another situation where there's that anger at why are we housing people who aren't even Americans? But
I already see people.
And it's not 50,000. It's going to be hundreds of thousands by the time, because everyone wants to get out. And they're using this as an excuse. And the New York Times says 200,000 people. So they're just going to bring them in. And then, of course, then they'll leave once they're safe, which is the refugee settlement strategy. It's always a lie. The people who are settled here stay here, because why would you go? Why would you go back?
Right. I mean, I grew up in St. Louis, and there was in most of my classes, 4 or 5 of my peers were from Bosnia, were refugees from that war. And they're not most of them married, American people, right? They're staying. They're not their lives and their family are here. They're not leaving. I mean, at least a few of my friends didn't even speak, I guess, Arabic. A few did, but not everybody did. And so, like, you know, they're not going, they live here. This is their home. And so, yeah, that it's always silly that they bring that up. Now, one thing I guess I'll disagree with a little bit. I don't think anybody's going to be jealous of this housing. I saw reports from Axios about the Aludan Air Base, where apparently it's just like shit covered and urine covered floors right now.
Oh.
I mean, like, you know, forget about, you know, the germ that we're currently, you know, all obsessed with, but think about the other ones that are going around, especially these are Afghan refugees, which is one of the few places of the world that you see like outbreaks of wild polio and stuff like that. And so there may be that kind of susceptibility, especially if you're dealing with a lot of feces and stuff like that's really concerning to me. Also, you're moving all these people through like the same kind of facilities, I would guess. And so,
Kyle,
yeah,
are you talking
and plus,
about the air base in Qatar? The staging base? Okay.
Yeah, this is a report from Axios that was out this week. And so I know it's Axios, but this is something that I really thought was going to happen as soon as, you know, the whole withdrawal from Afghanistan was clearly going to be a mess. It was obvious they weren't going to have housing, bedding, facilities, clothing for all of these people who are essentially getting on this plane with, you know, maybe a suitcase. I'm guessing the Taliban aren't letting people through like, you know, with like carry-on or anything like that through the checkpoints. I mean, imagine how many bombs you have going off if that was the case. And look at the immigrant facilities. Who do you think is going to get the contracts to run these housing? ServPro again? Probably. Or it's not going to be anybody any more qualified, or who cares anymore about the people living there. And so I'm sure it's going to be absolutely miserable to live in those places.
I just want to say, I don't want anybody to think I have a problem with housing refugees. I just think that, you know, I was watching Convo Couch the other day, and they've been doing a great job on nearly every topic. But they were talking about the guy who was out in front of the White House in a truck with a bomb that was wanting to get
Library of Congress, very close, close to the Capitol. Yeah.
But Fee made some great points that, like, you know, those people on the right are seeing that they feel like the government is doing all this for foreigners, others, you know, and it increases that hatred and the blame that really should be directed elsewhere. But I think when we're not, at the same time, when we're not taking care of our own, like, more and more, then we're doing this too. I think it just unfortunately is another thing that, you know, lots of people will see as others are getting something and they're not.
Yeah, so most people are going to see, you know, and so we just had these suicide bombers who killed Marines, and most people are not going to sort those bombers out from any other Afghans. Mm-hmm. And now they're going to see, you know, these thousands of Afghans flying over. And I've already seen some things on Twitter ranting at Governor Murphy for, you know, I can't even say what this guy was saying on Twitter, but just about flying thousands of Afghans in here. So anyway, there's just
it's another ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, there is, I mean, on the one hand, they're making this case, well, we have to help them because they were collaborators with us. And I'm kind of like, wait a minute, these are people who collaborated with a foreign occupying force and sold out their country. I'm not sure I really want them here, actually. I don't think that's a point in their favor. But secondly, like, where they don't house these people in Manhattan or Martha's Vineyard. They stick them in some kind of small town somewhere where people who really don't want them there. So this is guaranteed to one, have a backlash. And two, I think the numbers that they're pretending are low. I think there's so many Afghans who collaborated with the U.S. empire and want to get out. I think it's going to be way more than 50,000. I think even 200,000 is low. And so when you start getting to these really high numbers, like 500,000, you're not talking about a few refugees anymore. 500,000 people flowing into the country is a pretty serious amount of people, actually, even in a large country for 330 million, especially since I think there's a lot of virtue signaling about how people, oh, of course, I want to help refugees. But I think actually, I don't know any American who's really enthusiastic about this. I think the culture clash is going to be considerable. I think if you look at what happened in Western Europe when they let in Afghan refugees, they had all sorts of incidents, sexual assaults, crime. I think that's exactly what's going to play out here. There's no evidence that it's going to be a happy transition. Now, and also, hopefully, when this is going to happen anyway, so there's no point complaining about it too much. But hopefully, this will lead some people, particularly people who aren't big fans of immigration, to think, hey, this happened in Afghanistan, hundreds of thousands of people. This happened in South Vietnam. Maybe if I don't like having big influxes of immigrants from other countries who have to come as refugees because they're going to get murdered if they stay, maybe we shouldn't launch these crazy wars. Maybe invade the world, invite the world, as I think that's the right-wing attack on this. Maybe that's correct. So, but instead what I'm seeing is the exact opposite, which is all these seemingly America First people talk about reinvading, going back in, and you're like, wait a minute, are you pissed off about having all these war refugees? More war means more war refugees, doesn't it?
Well, I have to believe that they are not the majority, that they are just the vocal minority. Otherwise.
Yeah, but when we had Afshin, Joanne and I talked to Afshin Ratanzi from Going Underground a few months ago, and because I was just stunned that he actually said on the air, that all the immigrants, like coming into Europe, it was the wars, it was the Western wars that were causing all of that immigration. I mean, he just, got right to the root of the problem, and I think that's really not enough people just come out and say it. I forget the way he worded it, but in Afshin style, it was kind of like jaw dropping, just not mincing any words, and I think that's really the truth that a lot of Americans still just haven't wrapped their heads around, that it's our policies and our constant wars that are causing the problems.
I got some more numbers from that briefing for you.
Can I just add something to Dan's point real quick? Sure. They made about, how they're saying the numbers 50,000 might be 100,000. Understand that this is a country that the U.S. has waged a 20-year occupation in and has dumped trillions of dollars in. You've talked to Matthew Ho and Danny Shergen. I've talked to Danny and also Scott Spalding, who all handled money overseas, and talk about the huge amount of money that we handed out. I mean, when you do that in a poor country, you become the only game in town. And so I have to imagine there's going to be a massive problem in Afghanistan, especially when I'm guessing all the female doctors and engineers and anybody who's graduated from college in the past 20 years has probably done it through a Western NGO. And so that means they've probably been promoted as a female Afghan. And so they're going to feel like their life is at risk. And I think this is going to be the case with a lot of Afghans who have higher education now. You're going to see them all fleeing the country because they're, the U.S. provided all the higher education and all the training for all these jobs all these years. I mean, it's just been such a massive occupation in a country that was relatively poor. I mean, the other thing people did is sold heroin, and I guess that was probably on oftentimes behalf of the U.S. warlords too. So who knows if those people are going to be able to get out of the country or not. One other thing I want to mention is the left on this, not the good left, the bad left, the liberals, the Democrats, those people, are oh, this is so great, they're coming into our country and everything. And we should approach this very clear-eyed and understand, Joanne talked about the Chinooks flying over and shaking her house. I live in Colorado now, and so a couple times a year we'll have fighter jets fly over low enough that it scares my dog and it shakes the windows a little bit. This has been going on entire lives for these Afghans who are now in their adulthood. This is serious PTSD these people will be facing because of the absolutely. U.S. How many times have you read stories in Afghanistan about either U.S.-backed militants, the U.S.-backed army, a U.S. bomb, or a U.S. drone wiping out an entire family but a single kid? Well, if that kid was 5, he's now 25. Let's be honest about this. We could be inviting some blowback into our country here. And maybe that's a consequence of waging a forever war and something that we're just going to have to deal with as a society because we brutalized Afghanistan like this. But we have to be honest.
Did we do that? Did we brutalize Afghanistan?
No, but
I'm happy to put these people in Fairfax County, Virginia, where all the war profiteers live. I'm happy to put them in the New York suburbs where all the investors in Lockheed Martin live. That's a real thing. I think you're pointing to an important thing, but there's a disconnect. Yes, that's the thing about the refugees, because you always feel kind of like an asshole because you're well, I don't really want these people coming here. It's but look what we did. And it's wait a minute, did we do that? Wait a minute. So some small town is going to have to eat 50,000 immigrants who are going to change their entire society because people in DC, New York, and the hedge fund world wanted to make what Assange called the transnational security elite laundered money through Afghanistan. It's such a mismatch. It seems like to my mind, I'm not sure I'm even disagreeing with you. I think it compounds the injury that now, especially given the numbers, I think people you're just making a big deal over 50,000. It's not 50,000.
I appreciate, Dan, you lecturing the libertarian on using the collective we here. I only do it because who else has any say? And then the problem is that they're never going to go there. The elites would rather these people die in Afghanistan than live in their neighborhoods. And so they're either going to live in ours or live in Afghanistan. And those are kind of the two options.
But the example you gave of say there's a 25-year-old kid, are we inviting, terrorist cells that could happen? How many people are going to actually look and see what the root cause of that really is versus how many people it's just going to fuel more hatred, more animosity towards those people.
Well, can I just interject here real quick? When it happened in England with the Ariana Grande concert, I was surprised how much the media did talk about why that guy was angry and why he was there. So I don't know. Our media probably not.
They didn't with Omar Mateen at all, and it's not exactly the same because I guess he was born in the U.S., but I think his dad is an Afghan, and he shot up the gay club in Miami, and everybody was it's because he hated gays and was a Muslim. It's just it was straight up blowback because he went to Pakistan and saw U.S. blowing people in half with their drones and was like, well, I got to do something about this, and went crazy and shot up a nightclub, but.
Yeah, these are all great points. I don't know if any of us. Well, who cares if we're disagreeing? If we're disagreeing, and that's good, especially when you can do it in a debate type format. But
also, can I just question one other talking point here? I'm sure the Taliban are going to do some reprisals. There's no doubt, and that absolutely happened to many South Vietnamese after the U.S. pulled out of Vietnam. And this I keep comparing it to Vietnam. Not just because of the large refugees, because of how long the occupation was, how long of a war it was, how embedded like ticks we were in their society before we finally were burned out. And so I know there's this long-term history, and you do feel like you owe something to people. I'm not disagreeing with that. It's just, I don't understand that there's going to be this kind of reprisals. The Taliban's a loose-knit group of people. I'm sure they're going to go after some of the big hitters who are put the coalition or whatever collaborators who work with the U.S. But is there really going to be this widespread genocide? It sounds like a boogeyman story from the State Department or the CIA. I don't really buy that this is actually we're on the verge of some Benghazi type massacre is going to happen. I'm not even sure that that's true, let alone is going to be systemic. I just don't think there's this idea that they're in every single one of the hundreds of thousands of people they're trying to pull over are in immediate danger of reprisals. If anything, it looks like the Taliban, not to give them any credit for anything, but it looks like they're kind of playing it, keeping it pretty low key. They've had opportunities now to do wide scale massacres. They're in control of the country. The U.S. embassy is closed. I sent Joanne a tweet that the UK embassy has now been, they've deleted their Twitter account. There's no UK embassy in Afghanistan. So if they've had an opportunity right now to just massacre whoever they want, particularly Afghans, and they're not doing it, is there any evidence they're going to run some kind of extermination program, or are they going to let people just defect and say, this is the new order? And people say, okay. And that's probably going to be it. I just don't buy that these people are necessarily in immediate danger.
I think you make an absolutely great point there. And Scott Horton pretty much argued that on my show. But at the same time, this isn't the reality as we see it, but the reality of the Afghans looking to get out. And then I mean, what's the Biden administration going to do at this point, where they're going to be sitting at the gates of the Kabul airport and they're just all going to take off and leave them? I mean, the media will slaughter them over that. So I feel like the reality of the situation for the exit, Dan, is just that, the Taliban are brutal because that's the way people are acting and the U.S. is acting, even if, the facts on the ground really haven't shown that to be the case.
Well, their history, Kyle, right? Their history, particularly the Pashtun Taliban, right? Don't they have a reputation for?
But their history is they make deals. I mean, their history is the reason they took the country so quick and everything collapsed is they got the warlords, some of whom worked for us, switch sides, right? So they don't seem to have this kind of genocidal exterminationist. I mean, that's the way it's being framed. It's being framed like they're going to go in there and murder people. We're going to stop a Holocaust. And it's like, well, is there anything to back that up?
I'd be getting the hell out of there.
Okay, well, but I mean, yeah, I'd rather be living here than Afghanistan.
I don't want to be. I don't want to be a woman in Afghanistan right now, no matter what the Taliban say.
I mean, I guess, but you know, you're a woman living in the U.S. I don't think the conditions for the women in Afghanistan were all that. I guess that's one of the points to make about the Taliban so far is just, you know, compared to what, you know, compared to the U.S.-backed government that existed for 20 years, they haven't seen that much brutal. I mean, they committed mass slaughters of surrendered Taliban soldiers. I think like 3,000 at one point in time. Like they shot them up in a shipping container and like people like actually drowned in the blood because it was that kind of situation, you know, that level of horrific situation. Like this is the US, the Taliban haven't done that. And so when you look at compared to what, I mean, the bombings,
the constant bombings aren't going to be an issue anymore because the Taliban, well, they have our Air Force, I guess. But outside of that, they're not going to be engaging in widespread, unrestricted drone warfare or bombing campaigns, which is what was happening when people forget that Kabul is this little oasis like Saigon in the rest of the country. The rest of the country is like a free fire zone. The U.S. was constantly bombing the Afghan forces. So I just wonder, that's the other thing, like I wonder how many progressive women there actually are outside of Kabul, right? I mean, I will never forget that PBS report, which to me is so indicative of Afghanistan, where they went outside Kabul and showed Afghans pictures of 9/11. And they had no idea what it was. They were completely confused. Yeah. And one group of people said, this is Kabul. They're pointing at the World Trade Center being attacked by a plane. That's how out of this is like Restrepo or any of those documentaries. Like these people have no idea, there's no no internet, there's no electricity, they're not informed in that way. And so I just wonder if I just really have to question that talking point, because that talking point sits behind this policy that they're on the verge of some extermination event, and therefore it reminds me a lot of Libya, to be honest.
The other thing to just add to that is, this has been a 20-year war. And so I'm not quite sure how many Taliban, that lived in 2001 and were members of the Taliban still are. I would guess that almost all of them are retired. Maybe a couple of them, like Mullah Baradar, have, moved into leadership positions. But if you look at these guys, the actual Taliban fighters, they all look like 20-something years old. Mm-hmm. And some of them are walking around with smartphones. And I got to say, if you're, a 20-year-old guy and you're walking around with a smartphone, you probably looked at some porn. I'm just gonna be honest. And if you've looked at porn, you probably have a different opinion on the way women are dressing than maybe the Taliban from 20 years ago. So they may be a little bit more liberal. That's just as kind of a base group that may be the case. They seem to be younger and have smartphones. So that's just an observation I made.
Yeah, I mean, among ourselves, we've been saying all through this advance by the Taliban that the pictures and videos we were all saying, these don't look like the Taliban that we have seen before. So
yeah,
it's next generation Taliban under the advisement of other people too, I think. So, helping them with certainly, I think either they got very good at PR or someone was helping them with that, because they had some pretty good PR through this whole thing, didn't they? But it's
mostly that was most effective when it was countering completely ridiculous US talking points. Like they were like, the Taliban is ISIS, and they're like, no, we're not. Or the Taliban is going to put all women in cages, and they said women will have rights under our laws. Or the Taliban's going to go on a killing spree, and they're like, no, we'll help you get out. We'll try to keep the airport open. I mean, I just think they're vicious. They have a very fundamentalist. And then the Taliban had that great response, which make everyone crack up, which was like, if you can deal with Saudi Arabia, you can deal with us. It's really the same thing.
Yeah,
crazy world.
Which is true, right? If Saudi Arabia is essentially Taliban and Saudi Arabia I guess the system of Saudi Arabia isn't that different.
Saudi Arabia blows every argument out of the water. You can pull that card, for so many different things. It's because it's just crazy. Yeah.
If I were the Taliban's PR agency, I would be, look, guys, you just got to be a little bit better than Saudi Arabia. And, that's kind of the standard. Don't
bisect any journalists in your consulate. That's all you need to do.
Don't chop any heads off. They had all these films of the Taliban welcoming, taking over a town and, hugging the Afghan soldiers and just all these sort of peaceful transition videos that were, not what anybody expected to see. That was pretty good PR. Yeah. I don't know what really happened there. I'm sure some other things happened too, but yeah, it was pretty impressive for the people with the image of who I thought Taliban was all these years. But really, Taliban is another one of those names. What is Taliban? In some cases, it's just people from Afghanistan, right? Who join in. We don't. I don't know. They're not all from madrasas in Pakistan, right? So
I think they have actually accepted like some Hazaras into like Shias into their, ranks at this point. Now, I'm guessing that you probably don't get the status of, the Sunnis in the group or something. There's probably still some, Sunni like chauvinism in it, but like they don't like kill Hazaras on sight or anything like that. So.
All right, let me go back to numbers a little bit. So they also said that, in addition to the 2 airports and the military bases that I mentioned, there's also some special immigration visa processing centers at the Marine Base Quantico, Virginia, at Fort Pickett, Virginia, and at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. So I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do there, whether they're going to bring people there or I'm not quite sure. So
this is the vetting, right? Because they're kind of BSing about saying, they're taking people. They have to clearly be taking people, not just people who have SIVs or green cards. They're taking people that don't have any documents, which is why, this idea, that's why it's great. Yeah, stick to the timeline, because guess what? You're going to start running out of people who have any legitimate reason to be on these flights, and they're just going to take anybody, which of course makes sense for them. Like, let me get the hell out of Dodge. On the other hand, how many SIVs could there be really? I think there's people getting on these flights. I think if they get past the checkpoints, they're probably just putting them on the plane and then flying out.
But you're forgetting about one thing, which is there's a staging base in between. They don't fly straight from Afghanistan to here. They go to Qattar's the big base, the staging base where they screen people. Nobody says what happens if they get to Qatar and then they're...
Yeah, but screen them for what? They screen them to see if they're on a watch list or something.
They do like a background. Yeah, they do like
right. But I'm saying, if you're not, let's say you're not a terrorist, but you're also not actually someone who, quote unquote, earned it, which means working with us as a translator or whatever, and you get to Qatar, what happens then? So they screen you, which they're screening you to see if you are part of their intelligence database they have, which is, you are an insurgent or you're this. Okay, no pings, no hitbacks. They're going to put you on a plane to the U.S.
Yeah, I don't know what it takes to get through the State Department processing at the gates. I don't know.
Now, one thing that I learned from Ken Kleppenstein reported this. So at the Intercept, but he said that they had got in his reporting about how the Taliban had gotten their hands on some of those Hind devices, the biometric scanners. He had reported, and I don't doubt that this is the case, that the U.S. estimates that they have biometrics on 80% of Afghans. And so if these people are showing up at the Kabul airport without IDs or anything, there may be a possibility that they're able to identify by biometrics, a huge, or at least think they can. I don't
Yeah.
know how accurate those things are. They could get it wrong, like a huge, I don't know. But I'm sure they at least think they know who some of these people are that they're putting on the plane for that reason. And, I think this is a great point, because if these people are having to go back, that might make them real ass targets for the Taliban. Like, you tried to flee, like,
Well, WikiLeaks put out something, let's see, on the 24th, just a couple of days ago, saying that the NSA has been recording nearly all phone calls in Afghanistan since 2013. This mass interception system is a key element in the U.S. drone program, which has killed thousands of people. So apparently they've been surveilling that.
Yeah, that was an issue. Remember, Glenn Greenwald said that we weren't going to name the country that the U.S. is intercepting all phone calls from. And then Julian Assange says, it's Afghanistan, Glenn. Okay, that's the actual country we're talking about. But just to be clear, the process is not, they're going to check to see, as I understand it, they're going to check to see that they're on our vetted approved list. The process is they're going to check to see they're not on the naughty list. And then they're going to let them go through. So it's not. So I think the vetting is being set up, presented as if, oh no, we're only going to let certain people through who have worked for us and have proven their loyalty or deserve it. But that's really not how it's working. What is working is they're going to vet them to see if they're on the naughty list, and if they're not on the bad list, if not on a terrorist watch list or whatever they've gathered, they're going to have to push them through because there's planes coming right behind them, and they don't want to house them in Qatar. Qatar doesn't want. So I'm just saying. This is a recipe to have a lot of people go in who, since they're not on a bad list, that's fine. But I don't buy that there's going to be flown out of Afghanistan, and if they're not on a terrorist watch list, they're going to be flown back in. It's a one-way trip, in my opinion, unless they're actually confirmed ISIS-K or whatever Al Qaeda connected. They're going to say, "Okay, you're not on any of our bad lists. We got moves. We got to move these flights. See you in New Mexico." That's my view of how this is going to actually work. Maybe that's wrong, but that's my take.
No, I think you're right. It's going to be largely, if they got on the plane, they're good. They're going to get. There are some other countries taking some Afghans too. We've been trying to push that, and there aren't a lot of people coming forward. Canada, I heard 20,000. I bet they upped that number, but we'll see. But anyway,
hey, Joey, in that statement at all today, was there any idea of how they escalated the number of people they're flying out so quickly? Because I've kind of started to suspect that they've drastically changed how they were scanning people to get out of Afghanistan, and that has to account for it. Because before they were like able to do a couple thousand a day, and now they're doing tens of thousands of flights a day. Now, even if they're cheating by combining all the coalition aircraft, which are, as of like today, a lot of those countries announced, Germany, Australia, like 4 or 5 others announced they weren't doing flights anymore. But even if that's the case, I have to imagine that they must have really changed something in the screening process, because that was like a huge part of the problem, is they just weren't able to like look at everybody. So maybe they made some alterations there. Did they talk about that, or has anybody asked?
They didn't, but they did say that there were going to be 90 flights today. I'm pretty sure they said 90 flights, which is a lot of flights. But I do know, because I had that same, I know we talked about this, like, where's the bottleneck? What? And I figured it's got to be the State Department at the airport, the processing thing. I thought that's got to be the bottleneck. But in another Pentagon briefing, I don't know, a few days ago or whatever, they said that they stopped flights altogether for like, I don't know, 7 hours at one time. And there were another time they shut down flights for these periods of time with no explanation. Well, the guy in the Pentagon hearing said it was a temporary capacity issue in our staging bases area. So they were flooding the staging bases in Qatar. It turned out that Qatar was the problem.
Right. All the more reason they're not going to get thoroughly vetted, other than, are you on this bad list? No, go, because we're getting stuck. We're getting jammed. We got 90 flights getting jammed down our throat. We need you out of here. I
think that what increased, I think that either they got more help at Qatar and got more people through, but there were, they added some places where they could stage. I think Ramstein was one of them. And
they're bringing people to Albania today and South Korea.
I think that's what did it, Kyle. I think the bottleneck was the staging bases, plus, trying to get their act together. But we know that say what you want about our military, but they're good at logistics and moving stuff. They move incredible amounts of things and people. Kyle's like,
I'll disagree a little bit with that. I mean, they've accidentally shipped like nuclear triggers to Taiwan and stuff like that.
They can move a lot of stuff around the world. Jesus Christ, we have 800
right,
bases
but they can't coordinate anything. So they could fly a bunch of people to Qatar, but they can't make sure there's porta potties for everyone, right? Like they can do things, but they're not able to. I guess would be the difference. Like it's just a massive bureaucracy, and it's this massive bureaucracy in the Pentagon trying to work with the massive bureaucracy of the State Department. And honestly, I'm sure like half the people don't actually care, and some of them don't even want the Afghans coming to the U.S. and all these other personal issues getting involved. I wouldn't say they're good at logistics, but they try. I mean, they have all the resources to be good at it, Joanne. Yeah. They do. They should be.
Yeah.
This is the Woodstock 99 of evacuations.
I mean, you got to, one day, a few years ago, we went to a Rutgers football game, right? So they got a big expanded stadium now, but not enough parking. So the parking is satellite. It's actually on a different campus.
Oh my God.
Yeah. On Livingston campus, Dan. You have to park and the stadium's on Bush. So
stupid stadium.
Yeah. So it was around 30,000 people, 20 to 30,000 people. They have shuttle buses that go from the one campus to the other. It's only a mile or two, a couple miles. But still, even though they had the campus buses running continuously, the line to get on those buses to move 20, 30,000 people, it just gave me a view of it very up close and personal, and sort of it was easy to see this operation. And it just made me realize what it takes to move 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people. It is a serious job. That's a lot of people. So I guess. So
you don't want to get tripped up on paperwork, which is to say, I got to move these. I got to move these people. I got to move them. Or
they weren't doing any kind of checks on any of us.
They're not. Yeah, they're not. That's what I'm saying. They're just checking to see if someone's on the naughty list, and if they're not, they're pushing it through. So I just really we're doing vetting, or what did Trump call it? Extreme vetting. We're doing extreme vetting. They're not doing anything. They're just saying, "Oh, are you on this list? No, good. Move it. Go."
I don't even think they're like doing nasal swabs. A lot of these pictures of people in the C-17s don't even have masks on. Like it's crazy how every U.S. soldier apparently has to get the quote unquote prevention for the germ, right? And
we don't want to say the word.
Right. And yet
just call it the V, Kyle, the
V, right. Yeah. but yet, like there's no concern or like variants are spreading by taking a whole bunch of people and like moving them all over the world in the middle of a global pandemic. And look, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing it for that reason, but it's kind of curious that nobody's talking about it. That Sturgis is in the news still weeks later, and yet there's no reporting or concern at all about like the spread of COVID. Even if you're just concerned about like the lives of the Afghans and all these people or something like that, I don't think these planes are really intended to carry 600 people on a flight.
Oh,
like
hell
that.
No! They're ripping out seats. They're absolutely not. They're packing them in as much as they can and flying them. Yeah, right. If anybody has the thing, everyone has it in their proximity. They're breathing on each other. They're all over each other. There's no doubt if there is, and it could be a U.S. service member who gives it to them, because, you don't know if you're carrying the thing. So if some of these staging bases have an outbreak, what are they going to do then? What's going to happen then? Where's your... Maybe it'll change the tune of some of these people. Yeah, just let them in.
Well, when they get
it's like it's like a Black Lives Matter protest. It's a noble cause, Dan.
Yeah,
so COVID doesn't affect. Oh, I said I ruined it, Joanne.
The thing.
It was me.
You libertarians don't follow any rules.
All right, I got more numbers for you.
Oh, great.
Well, you're interested. It's generating conversation. So they say that Northcom, okay, I already told you this. Northcom services and additional forces are managing the flow of evacuees through Dulles and Philadelphia, which is why we got buzzed by some. It was probably some officer running to Philadelphia airport to set things up yesterday, which is why they shook our houses. Thank you very
Take them to
much.
Kensington. They'll feel right at home.
Oh, boy.
Take the
Now you're
refugees
going
to
to get us in
Kensington.
trouble.
It looks a lot like Afghanistan over there.
Yeah, it does. It does look like
lots of opium too.
Area.
It's perfect. Like this looks like this opium den. It looks like the one in Kabul.
Oh boy. Okay, so here's some more numbers. Right now, Fort Lee, Virginia, is their capacity is 1,750. They can take 1,750. They already have 1,647 as of today. Fort Bliss has a capacity of 5,000, and this is housing, and it may not necessarily be hard housing, so it might be. 10.
Isn't this where they have the border kids too? That's at Fort Bliss. I think so. Yeah, that's going to be a potentially really problematic issue, I guess.
He mentioned that the soldiers at Fort Bliss built a soccer field and some soccer goals for the kids today, and just how happy the troops are to be doing this kind of work and all that. But so they said they could take 5,000, but they're expanding, which probably means building
Fort Bliss.
Cities.
You're correct, Kyle. I just looked that up. Fort Bliss is where they're housing this other wave of immigration, which is at the southern border right now.
Millions.
So we can have refugees meet I don't know asylum seekers. So I guess they're both asylum seekers.
Well, according to the media,
we should call Texas New Asylum.
Americans don't want jobs, and there's all kinds of jobs, so that should justify flooding people into. Anyway, so Fort Bliss right now they have capacity of 5,000. They're going to double that, and at the moment they have 2,160. Fort McCoy has capacity for 10,000, and right now they have 2,383. McGuire, the Joint Base McGuire here in New Jersey, has the capacity for 3,500. They're going to expand it to 10,000. We're going to take 10,000.
Oh, 10 time.
And we have 1,192 at the moment. So we have 21,000 people at the bases right now. And this is where he said that this will increase to 50,000 by September 15th. And he said that number could get higher. So they're already saying.
Yeah, no kidding.
They already said.
By the way, Joanne, the AP is reporting that the U.S. just bombed the Islamic State in retaliation for the Kabul airport bombings.
God.
Where'd they bomb? Does it say?
No details yet, just that it happened, that a source from the Pentagon says U.S. airstrikes targets Islamic State in Afghanistan in retaliation for deadly Kabul attack. Those are only the details so far.
What are the odds they actually hit the right targets? Very low. This was like a face-saving, just before we leave gesture, a mass demonstration bombing. I'm sure they probably hit a bunch of people they didn't mean to. And so one for the road.
Well, I sure hope not. I was really hoping that Biden would wait until the U.S. was gone, because this seems like the kind of thing that's going to provoke more retaliation.
That's a good point.
Especially if they botched it. Like, imagine if they hit a Taliban target by mistake. I mean, this could be a real disaster. So I really hope that they really knew who they were bombing.
Didn't all our intelligence on the ground, all our intelligence assets on the ground, just get on a plane and get the hell out of there? So who are they coordinating this with? Who's giving them the inside info? Aren't those our people? Aren't those the SIV people who were probably on some of the first flights out?
Right. I mean, you would think so, because all the commandos, I think, either fled or they're stuck in the Panjshir Valley with Dostum and Masood and Noor, but I don't know why they would have particular intelligence on that. Maybe they got it from the ISI. Maybe they got it from John. I mean, they knew this was coming. CNN report, or the State Department the day before, named the specific gate to be hit and was warning Americans to stay away from it. So, I mean, maybe they did know who to bomb because they were tracking them the whole time. It just seems kind of curious that they weren't stopped until after it happened, if that was the case.
Yeah, they're kind of sitting ducks. I mean, just from a tactical perspective, right? They've long lines. They've got to wait a long time. I mean, I wasn't surprised to learn that someone hit it, right? Because that's a sort of a meaty target, kind of
Oh yeah.
Softball down the middle.
I mean, it was.
Not to mention if somebody started shelling the runway or something, like this could turn into absolute calamity in seconds. And so, I mean, they're really playing with fire. Fortunately, the U.S. and the Taliban have been able to talk and kind of stay on the same page. And even with this current suicide bombing, it didn't kick anything off. But I mean, the U.S. and the Taliban have been in war for the past 20 years. And so if, the war restarted again, like tomorrow, it could be really bad for the American side really quick.
Except Lindsey Graham, who wants to retake Bagram Air Base. Immediately after that attack, he put out like a tweet thread saying we can and we should take back Bagram.
Oh my God.
But hold on a second. Let me just finish these numbers and then we can talk more about the attack, which so they're going to, I already gave you the numbers. The DHS is helping with, everybody's in on this now, which, I mean, they need a lot of hands on deck. And they're going to stay on base until they complete the special immigrant visa process. They'll get medical support, V's.
Wait a minute, I thought they already had the visa. Why do they need to do that? Oh, because they're taking people who don't have the visa and therefore have to complete it.
They have to fill them out and all that, whatever.
No, if they had the SIV, they already did that, right? Exactly. These are people who didn't have the visa because you don't have to fill. Does that make sense? That's what I'm trying to deduce.
Well, they did talk about two different categories of people: the SIVs and at-risk Afghans. So,
right, risk. Who is that?
I don't know, but like, for example, there are
anybody who can get to the airport. That's who's at risk.
But there's also, there are people we know. Like yesterday, Matt Ho told us that he's working there are a lot of veterans who worked with people over in Afghanistan. Danny Sherson said he's working with a guy who did some translating work for him. These people are finding them or whatever. And there are a lot of interventions going on where people here are trying to help people, specific people they know from Afghanistan to get over here. So I don't know.
But this is just more the government botching the whole thing and just being bad at their jobs, that this wasn't lined up right away. And so there's tons of people who worked with the US who have like no line of communication to get out of the country at all. And if you're just somebody who'll throw into the gate of the Kabul airport, you're somehow going to get through and get on a plane. And so it's left up to people like, Danny and Matt and, scumbag Daryl Issa has apparently gotten 6 families out of Afghanistan somehow or something like that. It's just,
Glenn Beckett says he's over in the Middle East doing it himself, right? He's getting Christians out.
I wouldn't be surprised. Aaron Prince is flying people out.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff going on.
At risk, quote unquote, is you had a few dollars to bribe the Taliban to get past their checkpoint, and now you're at the U.S. checkpoint, and we just let everybody in. That's at risk. That's what at risk means in practice, I think.
I mean, this is I'll talk more about it later, but this is the big question for me: is why this whole process of the visas and stuff was in such infancy. Clearly, I hardly had anything. They've been talking a lot about it for months and months, but they clearly didn't do that much about it. So,
well, on the 17th, I think at the Milley and Austin presser, they said that the State Department was still working on the process for what to do with Afghans that didn't have a passport. They didn't even have they had how many months to draw up this withdrawal, and they didn't even bother to consider what they were going to do with a major category of people. It's crazy. The only explanation for how poorly that part of it has gone is that it was intentional by people within the bureaucracy to try to prevent Biden from doing the drawdown.
That's my only explanation, because Biden himself said the war was lost 15 years ago. So, but they certainly had time once Trump announced. Remember, Biden extended the Trump peace deal with the Taliban, which was supposed to be May 1st, everyone out. And so he said, no, we're going to do it on September 11th, which is why is this a great memorial? What are you even talking about? And now it's August 31st. And so he had all this time to set this up. And so why wasn't this set up? And why is the establishment, the Blob, the foreign policy Blob, tearing their hair out when this was publicly announced months ago? And the answer is people within the bureaucracy and people in the punditocracy, people in the corporatocracy, none of them believed this was going to actually happen. And some of them were, I think Kyle's right, actively slow walking it, so that when he went into a meeting and said, we need to get everybody out, they said, oh, we're not ready, Mr. President. You sure you want to do this? Are you really sure you want to do this? And so I think that's part of it. Some of it might be incompetence. I wouldn't put that past anybody, but some of it is definitely like, let's just slow walk him and not do anything and drag our feet and then say we're not ready to do it. That's kind of my read on it. That's conspiratorial, I guess, although
they got really good at it over the past 4 years, right? Because I mean,
who would have thought that Biden would be the one with Constitution and not Trump on the issue, right? You would think, Donald Trump, when people are going, the Kurds, he would have just been like, we're done. Too bad. We're gone. They shouldn't have trusted us. And it's Biden that's, like, no, we're leaving. It's over. That's it. So I've been surprised at how much he stood up here and hasn't extended this or anything.
I guess I should say a nice thing. I'm very, very surprised that he stood up to do this and give him credit, because those press conference when he came out and said, like, you want your son to go be the last one to die in Afghanistan? I was like, that sounds like Scott Norton out here. Who is this? So I give him credit for that. I don't know if he just a little stubbornness, or that people say, well, he never really agreed with the surge, but he is, to his credit so far. I mean, Tuesday, for people who don't know, that's when this is all supposed to be wrapped up. That's less than a week from now. I'm getting nervous about whether this is actually going to be true, although the enforcers are the Taliban. So if they say, right, but I've been pleasantly surprised by all of it. I thought this was going to be another Charlie or Lucy with the football, Charlie Brown situation, but it's happening. So.
No, I completely agree, Dan. And I like the Taliban kind of gets to set the rules here. And I don't think it's either a full scale like invasion and we'll kick the Taliban like we did in 2020 or 2001 and do this whole thing over again, or it's just leave. Those are the only two options at this point. And I think Biden has made up his mind. My suspicion is that I don't know if you caught this in his most recent speech. I think he said something about how his son came back from Afghanistan or Iraq and got cancer and died. And so I just had to imagine that this guy has to like realize every day that he's stuck with Hunter as his heir because, Bo got brain cancer from a burn pit in Iraq, and he actually understands what it means to lose a child from war. And so that's just like kind of his thing about these worthless things in the Middle East now. But I don't know why. I don't know what else could explain how this is the one thing the guy seems to have like a grasp on. He doesn't remember that there's U.S. troops in Syria and stuff like that. Can't say what the Iran nuclear policy is, for the U.S. and stuff like that. But boy, has he been able to stick to his guns on this one.
Well, it became personal. I didn't know that specifically, that they traced it, or they think that his brain tumor or brain cancer.
Yeah, there's a book on it. I could send you the link, Kelley. When
I know about the burn pits. I've heard other stories of soldiers that were there and had cancer, but I didn't know that.
There's a specific book that has a chapter dedicated to Beau Biden in it. Oh. And Joe Biden is like, somebody asked him about it once and he acknowledged that he had read it. And in that press conference, I think is one of the few times that I've heard him he seemed to acknowledge that was happening. Like the burn pits were he said other veterans had experienced this too. So I was very interested in that. And, it's kind of one of those things too, that makes you scratch your head. Like, how come those people aren't getting better care now that Biden's in the White House and knows that their condition is real? I
don't know. The same reason Barack Obama in his campaign talked about his mother with ovarian cancer was having to fight the insurance companies as she was dying, and he was going to make sure that didn't happen anymore to him. Whatever.
Yeah. Good point, Kelley. Really good point.
I mean, it was. Do you remember that? It was a big campaign. Talking about that, and you think, wow, he's personally experienced this, and wonder what his mother would think.
I got a couple more quick things, and then we'll switch over to then we'll let loose on our after hours thing. I'm not 100% sure that I got these numbers right, but people were asking about the demographics of the people who are coming over here or who are here. And they said about 50-50 male and female. And they said 15% with children, which I feel like that number is too low, but I don't know. He said a lot of pregnant women. And then lastly, they pushed him for some other numbers that he was like, I can't, we're just facilitating. You got to go to the State Department for better numbers. But when asked to guess how many Afghans who are, going to be pulled out of Afghanistan are still in Kabul today, he said 3,000 to 5,000. He said, but it changes hourly. So I thought that was much lower than I expected.
He means there's 3,000 to 5,000 in line. And so once those 3,000 to 5,000 go through the line, there's going to be another 3,000 to 5,000. What he says, the numbers change all the time. I think that's what it means.
Yeah. So anything else you want to say before we wrap up and go over to the, I don't know what to call it, the after hours, the let loose. What
are we letting loose about? Do we have any idea? Can we even say?
Well, we hardly even talked about the bombing and stuff yet, but I don't know, anything you want. The massive hypocrisy, some of the things we were talking about right before we started.
How about pulling back and looking at Afghanistan, sort of a little macroscopic view, which is like how unbelievably costly and stupid this war has been, and we're still not even done with it. I mean, it was in 2001, Al Qaeda was defeated, such quote unquote defeated in Afghanistan. For another, I guess, 20 years now, we've been there fighting the people of Afghanistan, which is who the Taliban is. The Taliban are not foreign fighters. They're the actual people that live there. They're a faction of them. We supported a group of people to take over the government who were incredibly corrupt. Even Ryan Crocker, who is probably one of the most disgusting people on this, has admitted that, if anything, the U.S. increased a corrupt system by building a national kind of corruption system. We've had deals with warlords. Opium and production has increased by 90%. We've lost thousands of people, spent $2 trillion. And now we're going to have to deal with a refugee crisis. And I just think, when I think of all this base activity, I just think, how much better would this country be if we didn't have these bases? We wouldn't have anywhere to send these people to. We wouldn't have anything to launch offensive capabilities from. It would be a much better place to live, and it'd be much better for the general population. So I think this war is an indictment of the empire itself. And insofar as I'm seeing these America's lost credibility pieces, which I don't really believe, sadly, I hope it's true. I hope people in the future don't trust us to come in and rebuild their country, don't do business with us, don't look to our quote unquote leadership in the international relations or global relations. And we just stop doing things this stupid. This isn't to no one's benefit. The only people who benefited are opium traffickers in Afghanistan and the defense contractors here at home, and some politicians who brandish their sense of being tough, like Lindsey Graham, by bombing foreign people. So I think the war itself has been a total disaster. I think it has no redeeming qualities, and the people who died for it died in vain.
On that note, is there a war that doesn't fit what you just said? I mean,
I guess World War II is always the go-to, right?
Right, but I mean, like in our lifetimes, at least, okay. I mean, it seems like all of them fit that. It's just a waste of money and lives, and I don't see what benefit it is.
Because it's not to us.
No, like, but we're spreading democracy, I guess, right? That's what I say.
Hey, Joanne, maybe in that the bonus thing, we could talk about that Richard Haas tweet to kind of piggyback off of what Dan was going into and just how ridiculous the whole geopolitical situation is. So I'm fired up on this one.
So we're going to switch over now to the bonus segment, and we're going to let loose. Let's definitely start with that Richard Haas tweet. The answer to the bonus question is in the extra bonus segment for patrons. You can get access to all bonus content by subscribing at Rockfin or Patreon, plus other perks like patron live streams, Zoom calls, and access to our Discord channel where we can talk among ourselves. So that's my pitch, and I hope that some of you will join us. And now I'll continue with the interview wrap-up.
Joanne, Dan, Kelley, thanks so much. It was great talking to all of you.
Yeah.
Will wanted me to tell all of you hi, and we'll have to do one with him sometime.
Tell Will to come join us for the next one. It'd be great.
All right.
So
thanks, guys.
Should we wrap up, guys?
Sure, let's wrap it.
All right. So until next time, take good care, everybody.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Special thanks to Kyle Anzalone, Kelley Lane, and Dan Wright. This podcast is independent media, listener support really important. Rockfin.com/AroundTheEmpire, Patreon.com/AroundTheEmpire, PayPal.me/AroundTheEmpirePod. And we'll also be adding some more ways to support the show. Find the podcast on any mobile podcast app. Everything you need is on the website, AroundTheEmpire.com, also on Linktree/AroundTheEmpire. Follow on Twitter @AroundTheEmpire, and join us on Telegram, t.me/AroundTheEmpire. And we'll see you next time. Take good care, everybody, and hang in there.